Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, my name is Nilam and my friend Nina. Now we will tell you about decentering or deconstructing the structures of knowledge. Let's check it out. So here are 6 topics in this discussion. Number 1 is structure, center, episteme. Number 2 is history of science as the series of substitution process of center for center. Number 3 is mean by cultural universal. Number 4 is how can we determine that truth is not cultural universal. Number 5 is what is mean by free play. The last one is describe the process of decentering the knowledge. Introduction. Jacques Derrida is responsible for the pervasive phenomenon in modern literary and cultural theory as known as Deconstruction. While Derrida himself has insisted that Deconstruction is not a theory and unified by any set of consistent rules or prejudices, it has been fairly regarded as a way of reading, a mode of writing, and above all, a way of challenging interpretation of text based upon conventional notions of the stability of the human self, the external world, and of the language and meaning. So, Derrida himself presented that was quickly recognized as a pioneering paper entitled Structure, Sign, and Play in the Discourse of the Human Science, a text which shows both what Derrida owes to structuralism and his path off from it. So, in the Structure, Sign, and Play, Derrida's endeavor might be seen as threefold. 1. To characterize certain features of the history of Western metaphysics as issuing from the fundamental concept of structure and center. 2. To announce an event in effect. Number 3 is to suggest the way in which current and future modes in thought and language might deploy and adapt Levi-Strauss inside the articulating their own relation of metaphysics. So now we move to structure, center, epistemes topic. According to Derrida, the concept of structure that has dominated Western science and philosophy has always been referred to as the center or a point of presence, a fixed origin. The function of such a center that has been recognized the structure and to limit the free play of terms and concepts within it. In other words, they foreclose such play. The center, says Derrida, is the point at which any substitution or permutation of element or terms is no longer possible. Although the structure thereby depends on the center itself is fixed and escapes structurality. It would be easy enough to show the concept of structure and even the word structure itself are as old as episteme. That is to say, as old as Western science and Western philosophy, and that their roots thrust deep into the soil of ordinary language, into whose deepest the episteme plunges to gather them together once more, making them part of itself in the metaphorical displacement.
The history of metaphysics, like the history of the West, is the history of these metaphors and metonymies. Its matrix, if you will, pardon me for demonstrating so little and for being so elliptical, in order to bring me more quickly to my principal theme in the determination of being as presence in all of the senses of this word. It would be possible to show that all the names relate to fundamentals, to the principles, or to the center, have always designate to the constant of the presence, eidos, archi, telos, energia, ousia, or essence, existence, substance, subject. And aletheia, transcendentality, consciousness or conscience, God, man, and so forth. Let us assume, therefore, that everything universal in man derives from the order of nature and is characterized by spontaneity, that everything which is subject to a norm belongs to culture and presents the attributes of the relative and the particular. We then find ourselves confronted by a fact, or rather an ensemble of facts, which in the light of the preceding definitions is not far from appearing as a scandal. The prohibition of incest presents without a least equivocation and indissolubly linked together the two characteristics of which we recognize the contradictory attributes of two exclusive orders. The prohibition of incest constitutes a rule, but a rule alone of all the social rules, which possesses at the same time a universal character. In elementary structures, Levi-Strauss begins from the axiom or definitions that belongs to nature, which is universal and spontaneous, not depending on any particular culture or on any determined norm. That belongs to culture, on the other hand, which depends on a system of norms regulating society and is therefore capable of varying from one social structure to another.
Now we move to the free play topic. Mentalization can also be determined in other ways, not from the standpoint of the concept of finitude as assigning to use an empirical view, but from the standpoint of the concept of free play. Free play, that is to say, a field of infinite substitution in the closure of an infinite ensemble. This field permits this infinite substitution only because it's finite, that is to say, because instead of being exhaustible fields, as the classical hypothesis, instead of being too large, there's something missing from it, a center which arrests and found the free play of substitution. One could say, using that word whose signification is always obligatory in French, that is movement, the free play, permit the back leg and the absence of the center or origin as the movement of supplementary. The movement of signification adds something which results in the fact there is always more, but this addition is a floating one because it comes to perform various functions, the supplement alike on the part of signified. The process of decentering the knowledge. In this behavior to understand the word, man therefore always has at his disposition a surplus of signification, which he portions of amongst things according to the laws, the symbolic trope, which it is the task of anthropologists and linguistics to study. This distribution of a supplementary allowance, ratio supplementary, if it's permissible to put in that way, it's absolutely necessary in order that on the whole of the available signifier and the signified it aims at may remain the relationship of complementary, which is the very condition of use of symbolic thought. The word appears a little farther on, after Levi-Strauss has mentioned this floating signifier, which is the veritude of the fine thought. In the words, and making as our guide must perceive that all social phenomena can be assimilated to language we see in mama, wakau, oranda, or the other notions of the same type. The conscious expression of the semantic function, those role is the permit symbolic thought that operate in spite of the contradiction which is proper to it. In this way are explained the apparently insoluble antinomies take in the notion. With or without etymology, in despite of the classic antagonism which oppose the significations throughout all the classical thought, it could be shown that the concept of episteme has always called for that historia, if history is always be united for a becoming as tradition of truth of development of science or knowledge oriented toward the appreciation of truth, the friends of self-presence towards knowledge and consciousness of self. So, that's all from us. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.